Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Dan.
I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time, we read about Ungoliant, an ancient spider in the form of a monstrous spider. It said, my script says an ancient creature in the form of a monstrous spider. Whoops, can't read. She joined Melkor in his plan of revenge against the Valar and the Eldar. Today we continue Chapter 8 of the Quenta Silmarillion of the Darkening of Valinor, beginning on page 74 of the second edition. Now it was time of festival, as Melkor knew well. Though all tides and seasons were at the will of the Valar, and in Valinor there was no winter of death, nonetheless they dwelt then in the kingdom of Arda, and that was but a small realm in the halls of Ea, whose life is time, which flows ever from the first note to the last chord of Eru. And even as it was then the delight of the Valar, as is told in the Ainulindale, to clothe themselves as in a vesture in the forms of the children of Ilúvatar, so also did they eat and drink, and gather the fruits of Yavanna from the earth, which under Eru they had made. Therefore Yavanna set times for the flowering and ripening of all things that grew in Valinor. And at each first gathering of fruits, Manwë made a high feast for the praising of Eru, when all the peoples of Valinor poured forth their joy in music and song upon Taniquetil. This now was the hour, and Manwë decreed a feast more glorious than any that had been held since the coming of the Eldar to Aman. For though the escape of Melkor portended toils and sorrows to come, and indeed none could tell what further hurts would be done to Arda ere he could be subdued again, at this time Manwë designed to heal the evil that had arisen among the Noldor, and all were bidden to come to his halls upon Taniquetil, there to put aside the griefs that lay between their princes, and forget utterly the lies of their enemy. There came the Vanyar, and there came the Noldor of Tirion, and the Maiar were gathered together, and the Valar were arrayed in their beauty and majesty, and they sang before Manwë and Varda in their lofty halls, or danced upon the green slopes of the mountain that looked west towards the trees. In that day the streets of Valmar were empty, and the stairs of Tirion were silent, and all the land lay sleeping in peace. Only the Teleri beyond the mountains still sang the shores of the sea, for they recked little of seasons or times, and gave no thought to the cares of the rulers of Arda, or the shadow that had fallen on Valinor, for it had not touched them as yet. One thing only marred the design of Manwë. Fëanor came indeed, for him alone Manwë had commanded to come, but Finwë came not, nor any others of the Noldor of Formenos. For said Finwë, while the ban lasts upon Fëanor my son, that he may not go to Tirion, I hold myself unkinged, and I will not meet my people. And Fëanor came not in raiment of festival, and he wore no ornament, neither silver nor gold, nor any gem. And he denied the sight of the Silmarils to the Valar and the Eldar, and left them locked in Formenos in their chamber of iron. Nevertheless, he met Fingolfin before the throne of Manwë, and was reconciled in word. And Fingolfin set at naught the unsheathing of the sword, for Fingolfin held forth his hand, saying, "As I promised, I do now. I release thee, and remember no grievance. And Fëanor took his hand in silence. But Fingolfin said, half brother in blood, full brother in heart will I be. Thou shalt lead, and I will follow. May no new grief divide us. I hear thee, said Fëanor. So be it. But they did not know the meaning that their words would bear. It is told that even as Fëanor and Fingolfin stood before Manwë, there came the mingling of the lights, when both trees were shining, and the silent city of Valmar was filled with a radiance of silver and gold. And in that very hour, Melkor and Ungoliant came hastening over the fields of Valinor, as the shadow of a black cloud upon the wind fleets over the sunlit earth. And they came before the green mound, Ezellohar. Then the Unlight of Ungoliant rose up, even to the root of the trees. And Melkor sprang upon the mound, and with his black spear he smote each tree to its core, wounded them deep, and their sap poured forth as it were their blood, and was spilled upon the ground. But Ungoliant sucked it up. And going then from tree to tree, she set her black beak to their wounds, till they were drained, and the poison of death that was in her went into their tissues and withered them, root, branch, and leaf, and they died. And she still thirsted, and going to the wells of Vada, she drank them dry. But Ungoliant belched forth black vapors as she drank, and swelled to a shape so vast and hideous that Melkor was afraid. So great the darkness fell upon Valinor. Of the deeds of that day, much is told in the Aldudeni and the Elmer. How do you say that? Oh my gosh, excuse me. Sorry, forgive me. This is rather unprofessional. Okay.
Greg, he needs help.
I need to start again. I need to start again from this part. Don't worry. There's a break in the paragraphing. So
I think it's
Elamire.
Elamire.
Yes, yes. But the other one as well is Aldudenie, right?
Aldudenie.
Okay, Aldudenie and the Elmire. Does that sound right? Okay.
Elamire.
Let's Elamire. Okay. Start that part again. Thanks for your patience. So great the darkness fell on Valinor. Of the deeds of that day. All right. Redo. Last time. Sorry, people at home. Thank you. People in your cars, on your way to work or on your way home. Thank you. So great the darkness fell upon Valinor. Of the deeds of that day, much is told in the Aldudenie and the Elmire of the Vanyar made, and is known to all the Eldar. Yet no song.
Try it one more time.
Oh my gosh. Aldudenie.
Elamire.
Elamire. Aldudenie, Elamire. Redo. Stop. So much great darkness fell upon Valinor. Of the deeds of that day, much is told in the Aldudenie, that Elamire of the Vanyar made and is known to all the Eldar. Yet no song or tale could contain all the grief and terrors that then befell. The light failed, but the darkness that followed was more than loss of light. In that hour was made a darkness that seemed not lack but a thing with being of its own, for it was indeed made by malice out of light, and it had power to pierce the eye, and to enter the heart and mind, and to strangle the very will. Vada looked down from Taniquetil and beheld the shadows soaring up in sudden towers of gloom. Valmar had foundered in a deep sea of night. Soon the holy mountain stood alone, a last island in a world that was drowned. All song ceased. There was silence in Valinor, and no sound could be heard, save only from afar. There came on the wind through the pass of the mountains the wailing of the Teleri like the cold cry of gulls. For it blew chill from the east in that hour, and the vast shadows of the sea were rolled against the walls of the shore. But Manwë from his high seat looked out, and his eyes alone pierced through the night, until they saw a darkness beyond dark which they could not penetrate, huge but far away, moving now northwards with a great speed, and he knew that Melkor had come and gone. Then the pursuit was begun, and the earth shook beneath the horses of the host of Orome, and the fire that was stricken from the hooves of Vaha was the first light that returned to Valinor. But so soon as any came up with the cloud of Ungoliant, the riders of the Valar were blinded and dismayed, and they were scattered, and went they knew not whither. And the sound of the Valaroma faltered and failed, and Tolkien was as one caught in a black net at night, and he stood powerless and beat the air in vain, but when the darkness had passed, it was too late. Melkor had gone whither he would, and his vengeance was achieved. Wow. Okay. A couple of surprisingly difficult words there. But quick summary before we jump into our little breakdown. Like perceiving that further evil is on the horizon, hoping to heal recent hurts, Manwë decrees this epic, glorious feast. All the Valar, Maya, and the Vanyar join, as well as the Noldor of Tirion. However, only Fëanor comes from Formenos, and the Teleri remain at Alquilonde. Fëanor and Fingolfin are reconciled, and Fingolfin vows to follow Fëanor. But then, as the light of the two trees are mingled, Melkor and Ungoliant ambush the feast. Melkor delivers deadly blows to both the trees with his spear, and Ungoliant feeds on the light, leaving the world in darkness, slurping up all of their goodness with her ugly beak.
I think Tolkien didn't like spiders as well.
Yeah, seriously. You read that part so well. It just sounded disgusting, you know. But in the best way. Like, you captured just how truly terrifying this moment was. But
it's horrible.
I don't think the audience will get to hear this, depending on how Cameron employs his.
I think he should keep
editing magic.
Plundering.
But it was kind of like Miriel, Fëanor's mother, who put all of her energy into Fëanor and then couldn't do anything after that and died. You just put all of your reading effort into that little paragraph, and then after that, you couldn't go on.
You died.
I died. No, we can keep it. It's fine. This is not. If you're looking to this and expecting a award-winning audiobook, then you're looking in the wrong place. We're just dudes.
Well, it was like a solid minute and a half of trying to read like 2 sentences, so I probably will edit it down.
No, don't. Leave it.
Well,
I'm just going to give you more
future
to edit otherwise.
Yeah. We'll do a special outtake.
You should just leave it, man.
sometime.
It's fine. It's okay. We all make mistakes.
All right.
I just couldn't
You
get
all
those
make
2
mistakes.
words.
Mhm.
What were they again? Let's
I
talk
hear.
about those 2 names, because that's the first time they appeared.
Yeah, but I think it's the last time they appeared too.
What's the point of okay, so all right.
Yeah, I don't remember those names being important. So let's just go back to the beginning of this feast, this glorious feast. Okay, I was doing a little bit of reading today, and apparently online, recently I asked, is Manwë a good king? We talked a little bit about that. I think he is for the most part, but apparently that's like a pretty lively discussion out there. And I don't put blame on him here, but you know what he was trying to do was like everything's going to be bad in the future. We know like Melkor's loose and doing evil things, so let's like try to like there's like this harvest time or whatever, and they're going to eat and drink and sing songs and praise Eru, and then it just like all falls apart when Melkor strikes. But I don't blame him.
Yeah,
I don't
you're
think
always
he's
throwing
bad.
shade at my way, my boy way.
He's a
good
you can't
king.
blame him. He didn't. You can't blame the victim of the violence, right? Like
Yeah, you'd have to say what he did wrong, maybe.
right.
He could have been more vigilant.
Right. Part of it's what we talked about, that he's just so trusting and he doesn't like comprehend evil. I don't know if that's like I'm not sure that he could anticipate this, but Melkor is just the worst.
Maybe he didn't know that Ungoliant existed, because we see later he tries to see Ungoliant and his eyes see farther than all, but they reach a darkness that even his eyes cannot pierce. So it's as if,
I mean, she
maybe,
swelled to a great darkness, didn't she? A great pussy black.
well, she was
darkness.
already, she lives in the unlight. Like the way I read it is that this is the first time Ungoliant like revealed herself in the open, at least to the Valar.
Yeah, but I mean, like after she drank them dry, she belches this black vapor as she's drinking. So she's like, she's like, I don't know how you do that. And then she's swelling to this shape so vast and hideous that even Melkor was like,
I love that line, that even
Get outta
Melkor
here.
was afraid. Oh, that's terrifying.
I'll do Denier. And
I'll do Denier.
And Elamirier.
Your name, next time you do your name, it should be
I'll do Denier. Yeah.
I'll do Denier.
I'll do it right now.
Or Dan Gulliant.
No. Definitely not.
This I know we talked about the darkness and the light, how the light of the trees might work and how the darkness of Ungoliant might work, but this is pretty amazing, this description after she like kind of kills the trees and sucks the light out of them. It says the light failed, but the darkness that followed was more than a loss of light.
Mm-hmm.
In that hour was made a darkness that seemed not lack, but a thing with being of its own. For it was indeed made by malice out of light, and it had power to pierce the eye and to enter heart and mind, and strangle the very will. It's just this immense darkness that has a life of its own, you know?
It goes back to our
pierces you and weakens your will, like enters you and makes your will like impotent and your mind confused. It has an active quality. It's evil. Strangle the very will. Yeah.
Does it I mean both of the strangle the very will is a pretty harrowing thought, but it goes back to one of our discussions in a previous episode. There's a philosophical concept of evil or bad, of not having its own being, but necessitating like the distortion of something good. So maybe that's like adds extra weight to this phrase. Like in that hour, there was made a darkness that seemed not lack, but a thing with being of its own. Like, and the next sentence is, for indeed it was made by malice out of light, and it had power to pierce the eye, and to enter the heart and mind, and to strangle the very will. But it's
kind of like how Melkor doesn't really create unique things. He just twists the creation. You know, he he develops the orcs by like the torture of these elves, these like, you know, proto elves or whatever. And but this is something different than, I mean, it is a twisting of the light, but it is like,
It's something more. Yeah. I mean, the
yeah.
line before that says was more than a loss of light. So like when we experience darkness and light, it's like, well, where light is, darkness cannot be, and light expels the darkness. But this is like, this could be a darkness that's in a bright field, but it's still impenetrable and it still has effects on you.
It kind of sounds like a description of a black hole.
I was going to say that, but it's the reverse. Because
Well,
a black hole sucks into itself.
right. Like if you could have a black hole that was like close to you or something, you know, like,
yeah,
and it's just actively like at work,
yeah.
just opposing the light.
One thing that stuck out to me was, I'm thinking about this from like a high view of like the arc and what's happening is, you remember when the Valar went back into the keep, so to speak. Like they built up the mountains of the Pelori, they went to the west and like tried to preserve the light instead of, you know, fixing all the ills of Middle Earth. They went to the west. We're gonna have the trees here, have our light, protect what is good, and even that is, you know, consumed eventually.
Yeah.
Like what a devastating moment that these trees have been killed in this hideous, like devastating way.
Like
I mean,
desecrated.
it's not that they died, but they were maliciously, you know, irreverently, you know, sucked up.
Yeah.
And now they
With
sit
the
in
belching.
darkness.
Oh. Okay, so this does make me think a little bit about the Valar in general, you know? Like, I think you could say that that was a pretty critical error to just abandon Middle Earth and, like, set up their own little safe haven. Maybe. I'm not saying they're bad or that they're poor in their duties, but, you know, even Ungoliant, the fact that it exists, they didn't know that this creature existed, I don't think, or it kind of seems like that. And maybe they could have known if they continued to, you know, steward the world. But so I'm not saying that they're like malicious or even like stupid, but there's just things that you can't know. And, you know, there's errors that we make that are because we don't know, we don't have all the knowledge. And that makes me think that Manwë is good because like his defining quality is that he knows the will of Iluvatar the best. And so even if he's, and we know, and it's like said clearly that Iluvatar is good. So he's
and in one aspect, this is what the will of Iluvatar is, because it's all part of the music.
Right.
So Manwë is in one sense the perfect king because he's carrying out the will of Iluvatar even in situations like this. Maybe without realizing it, but he listens to Iluvatar and it's time for a feast. And maybe he doesn't see like the end result of that, probably doesn't, but in one sense he is carrying out the will of Iluvatar. This is the part of the music that is, you know, devastating, and it feels like Melkor has taken everything.
Yeah, I do like to think of the, like what transpires in Arda is like echoing what transpired in the original music. I think that's it. That's a good way to interpret it. And I think maybe it's too simplistic of me. When we say is Manwë good, I mean obviously when we don't mean morally, we mean competently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is he a competent leader? But like, what are we comparing that to? Like human leadership? Like they're beings that they have their own ways of doing things, and all of them seem. So if he's incompetent, then they're all incompetent because they like kind of debate him, and then he says, "No, this is how we're going to do it," and then they follow him, and they say, "Oh, okay, cool, let's do it like that." So they're all incompetent, or so I don't have a problem with just saying no. It's just in the mode of how they operate, this is just how they operate, and we can't apply human competency to it.
Right, because they don't know everything. They don't know about man, really. That man is kind of a mystery
Sure.
to them. They don't even know when they're going to come. But also, they know from the music that Iluvatar is going to make even better things from disaster and the
Sure.
evil that Melkor introduces. So, in anticipation of that, it makes sense that they would kind of go with these things, you know, and not exactly like step into, you know, like they could have locked up Melkor longer, but maybe the good that was supposed to come out of this was Melkor like returning to his original self,
Yeah.
or something, right? So they don't really know, and they're just trying to go with what they have.
Yeah, they're not deterministic.
They're not their will is good, but they're not like all knowing.
Yeah.
So there's still mess.
Yeah.
And I think they're okay with that to a degree because they know that good will come out of it.
Yeah.
And we don't have to lower their competence to account for when they are overcome, because we could just say that Melkor is brilliant in his scheming. You know, he knows exactly how to, you know, overcome them or sneak past them or trick them. You know, he is the brother of Manwë in a sense. Like, he is the highest of the Valar.
Yeah, I mean, talk about Tolkien, who at the end of this chapter we find is as one caught in a black net at night. Talk about being overcome. I mean, that just sounds like a nightmare, being caught in a black net at night. And he's like powerless and beat the air in vain. Like, he's not only powerless,
because
but he's
all he does is
emotional.
use his fist to fight things. So even when he's trapped, he's just like punching the air.
Maybe he's Italian of descent, so it's just his way of like.
One last thing that we kind of passed over that I was interested in at least mentioning was Fingolfin and Fëanor reconciling. Isn't that just like
what
such a good thing? Yeah, I love this line that Fingolfin says to him. He takes his hand and says, "Half brother in blood, full brother in heart will I be."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He just seems steadfast and faithful.
Yeah.
And Fëanor, it seems like, all right, okay, you got me.
You wore me down.
It's interesting that it says, but they did not know the meaning that their words would bear. Excited to see how that plays out.
Yes, it is very interesting how that plays out.
Yeah,
and actually, we get into it very soon. So
okay,
yeah, you don't have to wait that long.
Yeah,
well,
just,
in that
just
case,
a week, unless you're listening to these, 3 times a day.
Yeah, and then just probably skip this last bit, because if you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship, and send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. And join us next week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.